With the Las Vegas Raiders being on their bye week lately, there has been some chatter I've seen and just some speculation on who will be the next head coach for the Las Vegas Raiders. We know Josh McDaniels got fired, and ever since then, Antonio Pierce has been the interim head coach. It looked like he started good the first 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks he's won, and I don't know, ever since then, I've been seeing a lot more of these reports, which I don't know exactly why. I mean, the season is still early, but you know, we've heard about John Harbaugh always being a possibility this offseason if he decided to leave Michigan. You got people saying that if he's a candidate, the Raiders have to inquire about Harbaugh. We also recently just got a report about former Stanford head coach David Shaw being a candidate potentially in this offseason. But the craziest report that I have seen thus far is this one that I'm going to talk about today and mention. And it's the fact that could Mark Davis really want to bring back a former Raiders head coach once again, especially if the season doesn't end how Mark Davis envisions how it should end, with Antonio Pierce being the coach right now. If the Raiders end the season on a losing streak, there could be a big possibility that Antonio Pierce won't get the nod as the head coach. And if that happens, could Mark Davis go to this candidate? Now, after Davis fired McDaniels, he made the decision to promote linebacker coach Antonio Pierce to the interim position. And Mark Davis also stated that he doesn't have anyone specifically in mind to be the Raiders' next head coach. But not everybody is buying that same notion though. And some think that Mark Davis may still have John Gruden on his mind again. According to Hondo Carpenter on the Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast, I mean, if you haven't done so, you can always check out his shows. He puts out some great content out there. But according to him, he stated that John Gruden currently has the NFL backpedaling when it comes to his lawsuit against the league, and it could potentially lead to his return as a head coach. Hondo Carpenter stated, look, I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of people who feel that Mark Davis, more than Tom Brady, more than Jim Gray, that the person he trusts the most in the NFL is John Gruden, and that he would love to bring him back as a coach. I'm hearing from multiple people around the league that if John Gruden were willing to drop his lawsuit against the NFL, they believe the National Football League would give a passive nod to go back and rehire him as a coach. Everyone keeps talking about John Gruden. Now, wow, this is very shocking news to me. I mean, Hondo Carpenter is definitely a reliable source as a Raiders insider, so if he's generally hearing these things, and look, it could be a legit possibility that maybe Mark Davis has John Gruden on his mind to be the next head coach of this team. Now look, he's not going to make that decision until the season is over. We understand that, but look, Mark Davis never truly wanted to fire John Gruden in the first place. Let's be honest about that. He was forced to do so after the whole John Gruden email scandal, which, you know, eventually has led to this lawsuit. And he was even asked about this after one of the team owners meeting at that time period, and you could tell he was just not happy with the decision. He was not in a good mood. He told the media to ask the NFL about this question. So look, there's no doubt that Mark Davis likes John Gruden as a person and as a head coach. I mean, he liked him so much that he gave him a 10-year, $100 million contract, which at that time period was a contract that was really unprecedented at that time period, especially for a guy who hadn't been a head coach for over a decade. So that just goes to show you how much confidence Mark Davis had in John Gruden. He gave him full autonomy. He gave him the freedom to make decisions when it comes to personnel. He gave him full reins of the franchise. So with all this being said, given the circumstances, do I think John Gruden could be a legit possibility to return as the Raiders head coach? Look, I personally hope he doesn't. I hope he does not come back as our coach. I mean, look, first of all, I still think Antonio Pierce needs to be the current front runner to be our next head coach. I think he's shown all the leadership traits you need to lead an NFL locker room, and he has a team fighting for him at this moment. Look, the Raiders have lost back-to-back games, but let's be honest, it was against the Miami Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs. Both are teams that nobody expected the Raiders to beat. And look, he had us in both games being very competitive. Versus Miami, we had a legit chance to win the game. We weren't able to pull it through. Versus the Chiefs, we had them on the ropes for a little bit, but we just weren't able to adjust and keep it up in the second half. So I really hope Mark Davis gives him a legitimate shot and a legitimate chance to win this job. I don't really like all these coaching rumors coming out after these back-to-back losses, especially when, Pierce is in the middle of trying to turn things around. The current situation we have going on, really, we shouldn't have to be talking about any head coach until the season is officially over, and then we can make a much better and more fair assessment with Antonio Pierce. And really at this point, I think us as the fan base, we really need to give Antonio Pierce all the support at the moment for him to win this job and turn things around this season, end this season on a strong note. I understand now that it's still really early and everything can change from here until the regular season. Antonio Pierce has to back up his case with victories, and we can't rely solely on his leadership traits to be able to turn this franchise around. But if a credible reporter like Hondo Carpenter was willing to report on this news, it must have some bit of legitimacy. And I say, look, I hope this is not true, because I think going back to John Gruden would be a huge mistake for Marc Davis, as it was a huge mistake when he initially hired him back in 2018 and gave him that ridiculous contract. Look, let's not just forget that in 3 full seasons we had John Gruden, he managed to trade away our best player for draft picks because he wanted to rebuild that way. Okay, sure, whatever, that's fine. But with those draft picks, he failed miserably with those first rounders, selecting Cleveland Ferrell, Jonathan Abrams, Damon Arnett, Henry Ruggs, all players who don't play for this team anymore. And in 3 full seasons, I mean, he never had a winning record. And ultimately, I think he set us back as a franchise with his poor draft selections and some bad free agent signings like Corey Littleton, who was a guy who we were still paying part of his contract last season, which is crazy. I mean, he put us in a bad situation from a draft standpoint and from a financial standpoint. I think a lot of people love John Gruden as the character, as, when it comes to nostalgia too. I mean, he used to be a great head coach for us back in the day, but look, that was over 20 years ago. Yes, I do like John Gruden's personality and all that type of stuff, but I don't think he's the right man to turn an NFL franchise around. I think the game has passed him by. If anything, I think he'd probably be served better as like a college coach than an NFL coach at this period. But just in general, I hope this is just a rumor. I really hope it has little to any legitimacy on this. But even in the scenario where Antonio Pierce doesn't win the job, let's say we finish the season on a losing streak, Marc Davis isn't sold. Even if this were the scenario, I think there would be much better coaching options than to return a John Gruden, in my opinion. And I'm not really going to go over those options because, as I said, I think right now we need to be focused on who we have at the moment with Antonio Pierce. And with all these reports on potential head coaches, look, I think it is slightly disrespectful to Antonio Pierce, who is in the middle of trying to turn things around. Look, let's give him a legitimate shot to see if he can win the job before we start naming all these potential head coaches, when, look, the solution may be in-house already. And although I really want Antonio Pierce to be our next guy, our next head coach, I also understand that this job isn't won by just winning a couple games versus the Giants and the Jets. I think he's going to have to finish out this season on a strong note to ensure he gets a legitimate chance to win this job. But Raider Nation, those are my thoughts and opinions on this latest article about John Gruden potentially returning as a head coach for the Raiders. But I definitely want to get you guys' feedback. What do you guys think about the report? Would you guys like John Gruden to be back as the head coach? Let me know in the comment section down below. But with that being said, Raider Nation, that is all I have for you guys in today's video. Anybody that is new to the channel, you guys love Raider related content just like this one, make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the channel. With that being said, I will see you guys in the next one.